Hey, it's Mike and Kayla. I bet you're wondering why we're all dressed up, but we thought we would do a video for all the people who can't come and visit the farm during the time of the Cove. So welcome to Arcadia. So Arcadia is a permaculture farm, and the essence of the permaculture is a sort of compound word meaning permanent agriculture. So it's growing food based on perennial crop systems rather than annual crops, with the idea that a well-designed system will effectively be self-perpetuating. So you do a lot of work at the start to design things and to put things in the right place. And after that, you just continue to harvest and harvest and harvest with minimal further inputs. So the beating heart of the permaculture farm and the starting point here is our permaculture orchard, which right now doesn't look like a whole lot, but in 3 to 5 years we should be getting a pretty heavy volume of all different kinds of food out of here. So right now we've been working on setting up our tree layer. So we've been buying and planting a bunch of fruit trees where we've got pears, we've got some apple seedlings, we've got this old apple here, which is a Paula Red, and 2 apples there, which we don't know what they are, but we're trying to rehabilitate them through proper pruning. And then we've got a cherry and an apricot, a couple of pear trees, some cherry shrubs, some like sour cherry shrubs, and then we're planting a bunch of stuff in between. So basically after we have the tree layer, which will form the canopy, and every third tree is a legume tree or a nitrogen fixing tree that will fertilize all the other trees and all the other plants around it. So after we've established that canopy of fruit trees and nitrogen fixers, then we're going to establish a shrub layer, which we've already started a little bit. We have a goji berry here. We've got a currant here, which we don't know what kind of currant it is because we just dug it up from somewhere else. And we have a gooseberry here that may or may not survive. And in the meantime, Kayla's growing a bunch of different kinds of squash and pumpkins in here because there's all kinds of light because the canopy is a long way away from being closed. But the chickens are going to come through here. They're going to knock down all this grass. We're going to come in behind them and sow a bunch of stuff that will be good forage for the chickens in the future. And a bunch of wildflowers and everything like that. And so to keep, we've got these bands that we've mulched heavily with cardboard and wood chips, and we'll sort of build slowly out from the bands and replace the grasses and the quote-unquote weeds with stuff that we can eat. And then from here, we'll start planting out, or we'll start fruit tree seedlings, which we'll start planting out in larger scale in the field with fruit trees, nut trees. Oh yeah, we've got a couple of hazelnuts and a whole bunch of walnuts that were here. And there's a really sickly looking heart nut tree over there that I don't think is going to make it. But those will be the starting nursery stock, which we'll plant out over the whole 35 acres.
So right now I am standing in the pen with our chickens. So we have 12 red sex-linked hens and 1 rooster. And they are about 2 months old now, just over 2 months old. They're not laying yet, but they live within this electric poultry net that we're able to move around to different locations on the farm. And then at night they get closed up into this chicken tractor that Mike built. So there's a piece of asparagus growing up here. So yeah, chicken tractor has nesting boxes at the back. So when they do start laying, that's where we'll collect the eggs from. There's a little ramp, and every night we close it up, lock it up so that they're safe and they can roost on the roosts in there. They also have some minerals in there and a dust bath because they do like dust bath. And it's also designed so that they can take shelter underneath it during the day if they don't want to be out in the hot sun. So this is the second or third location that we've had them in the poultry net. and they basically go around and knock down grass, eat bugs. Right now they're under an apple tree, so they're also, oh, one just bit my toe. Right now they're under an apple tree, so they're eating all like the spent fruit from last year, and any bugs or things that were in the fruit go away. But they do like us very much because they know that we come out with the food. Although they don't love being picked up. And we tried to name them, but they all kind of look alike and they keep changing, so they don't really have names.
What's the name for the one that bit you?
The one that bit me is called Pot Pie.
And why is that?
Because it may end up as a chicken pot pie if it doesn't stop biting us. So this is an asparagus patch that was existing here. It's probably about 25 years old, but it's still producing really well. It's given us anywhere from 2 to 4 pounds of asparagus a day, which has been great to sell at the farm stand. It's very overgrown with grass, and we did have some issues with asparagus beetle living in the grass. You can see just right there are a bunch of asparagus beetles on the asparagus, and they like to hide in the grass as well. So we've been pulling the grass and picking beetles almost every day to try and get it under control, but still have had a relatively productive asparagus season, so we hope it continues for another couple weeks because we really like eating asparagus.
So this is, we don't really have a name for it right now, we just call it the garage garden. And as you can see this year it's mostly planted out to garlic. We're trying a bunch of different kinds of garlic. There we've got garlic that we've been growing for the past 3 years in Toronto. That's slowly catching up to the Northern Ontario garlic, which started really strong. This is just stuff that we bought for seed in the fall. And at the end, the little stuff is the stuff from the previous owners. They left us half of their garlic crop last year because we took possession halfway through the summer. So that was awfully nice of them. And implanted in here, we've got, what kind of squash are these?
Sweet Reba.
Sweet Reba, which is like a
Acorn type?
Yeah, it's an acorn type squash. There's some borage, which is a flower that attracts beneficial predators that eat things that eat squash. And then a whole bunch of chamomile, which I just read today actually self-seeds, so we may never be rid of chamomile. And we had sunflowers. This was supposed to be a whole wall of sunflowers, but the squirrels ate them all. So, ain't farming fun. So now I'm standing in front of what we've called the ants garden, and that's because Mike's ants were here in the fall and helped me clear it out. It was way overgrown with grass and daylilies. It was just taken over, so we tried to reclaim some of it, and it's a work in progress just because we're seeing what's coming up. You know, this is our first spring here. So lots of lily of the valley. We had some crocuses and snowdrops come up. I planted some dahlia tubers in the middle, so I'm hoping those will be nice and big. And we also have some poppies, which are from Mike's aunts in Mount Forest. So I'm looking forward to seeing those. They're about to pop. We had some tulips in here. And I'm just trying to reimagine bit by bit what it can look like and move things around slowly, but it is a work in progress. And at the end we have rhubarb, which has taken over a large part of it, which we're going to divide this year. But we've been selling the rhubarb in the farm stand, and people love it. We weren't really expecting it to move, but that's been going pretty well.
And how many gardens have you grown before this one?
This is my first garden, and sometimes Mike helps me weed it, which is very nice.
When I'm told.
So I'm standing in the middle of lawn right now, but I have a fairly ambitious plan to turn this into all perennial flower gardens with just pathways on the well-trodden paths that we use, so that way I don't have to mow it as much. Well, we mowed it today to make it look good for the movie, but and for the baby. But yeah, so hopefully one day this will not be all lawn. So standing in front of our Back to Eden garden, which is our main vegetable garden. It's called the Back to Eden garden, sort of named after the style of gardening championed by a guy named Paul Gauci on the West Coast. Basically, it's a deep mulch wood chip system, which is really nothing new, but you know, it's sort of in the line of permaculture concepts. So the entryway to it will eventually have an archway with, I don't know, roses or some sort of like cool climbing vines over the top. And again, perennial flowers out front. Along here is all strawberries. So we planted 50 strawberry crowns this year, which means no strawberries from our own land this year, but next year we should be swimming in them. And we've got some Egyptian walking onion here, which is a perennial self-seeding onion. Some garlic that came up on its own. Some garlic that we planted, some comfrey, which is one of the best plants in the garden. It's effectively, it's its own fertilizer. And on this side, transplanted some tiger lilies and some hostas and some bleeding hearts and coneflower. And I hope that this is black-eyed Susan and I didn't just transplant a weed into it, but I guess we'll find out in July. So come on into the garden. So we call this our rabbit-proof garden. Starting last fall, we dug all the way around the outside of it, about 130 linear feet, dug down a foot, out 6 inches, and then put hardware cloth down in the trench to keep rabbits from digging in, and then filled it all back in, pounded in posts. And it's on a slope. I don't know if you can really see it in the video, but it's about a 10-degree slope. So we dug in, we measured out points of same elevation all the way across, where each of the beds are going to go, and then we dug out pathways so that way when it rains, the pathways will fill up with water, which will water the root systems of the plants. We piled the pathway dirt in behind a bunch of logs that we hauled in from the woodlot, which will eventually compost down and feed the plants. Put cardboard over top of everything, put a thick layer of wood chips over top, and this spring we planted into it. So come and see what's grown. So here we've got some broccoli that has already tried to bolt on us because we had a couple of 30-degree days in May, go figure. We've got some Swiss chard. We have some onions that have had a really rough go. We put them in the ground too early because we didn't plant them in deep enough soil. Up here is sort of, it gets a lot of afternoon shade, so we've got a lot of our leafy greens, lettuce, arugula, spinach, kale, mustard, more kale, more spinach, more lettuce, and then bok choy at the very end, which also looks like it's bolting as well. Along here from the Swiss chard, we've got some tiny little fennels that are coming up, and grass, and cauliflower and more onions. In here we have non-medicinal marijuana. We have lots of peppers, Thai basil, nasturtium, and planted some marigold seeds, and we'll see if those come up. Here we have more pepper, actually, oh, and there's eggplant down there too, for people who like eggplant. Then there's a whole bunch more peppers here. We've got red and yellow beets. Then we've got red and yellow beets that we direct seeded. In here we've got corn, which we don't seem to have the best germination on, but so we planted more. We'll see what happens. Yellow zucchinis, some edamame soybean, and some really sickly looking radishes. Down here, got some lettuce, a bunch more radishes that Kayla started that are doing better than the radishes that are like a month older than them. And all our Roma tomatoes for canning, and all of our bush tomatoes are in here. Along this fence, we have shelling peas, and along this fence, we're going to grow some bush beans if they ever come up. Strawberries along the outside of the fence, potatoes along the outside of the fence there. Tiny little cauliflowers, or not cauliflowers, cucumbers. So these ones are pickling cucumber. that should climb up and cover the fence. And over here, more beans. Well, one lonely bean. We're not sure if the birds are getting them or if they're just bad seed. And then eating, like slicing cucumber here. More beans. These are pole beans that we saved from seed. We have our tomato trellising system, which is just 7-foot T-posts with a little bit of like a little T-junction for water piping for PVC pipe, and electrical conduit run through it, and then just running strings down that we just wrap around the tomatoes and train the tomatoes up. By the end of the summer, these should make a big tomato archway, and we can just walk through and pick tomatoes from our archway. Over here, sugar snap peas. Where'd the dog go?
He heard a squirrel.
Okay. Again, bad germination rate, so we don't know if it's the seed or the gardener. And more onions, more tomatoes. There's some little sickly looking onions along there too, with basil, nasturtium, all that sort of stuff. So we've planted a lot of companion plants, which either improve flavor, repel pests of the main crop, or attract pollinators or predator insects that eat the things that we want to eat. So this is our Back to Eden garden. So another permaculture principle is using microclimates, which is little spots and little niches in the farm and in the gardens that has a different climate from other parts that might allow certain things to grow. So here we've got our herb garden up against the house, similar to what we're doing with the garlic this year, and using the warmth of the house to extend the season and to grow some Mediterranean herbs like thyme. We've got Greek oregano, we've got summer savory, we've got garlic chive, we've got lovage, we've got tarragon, parsley, a couple different kinds of basil, cilantro, garlic, and we're going to keep adding to that as we get our hands. Oh, and there's lemon balm there too as well. And the last few nursery plants, the little eggplants lagging behind everything else. So yeah, we're going to use what we got to grow as much delicious food as we can, and herbs are certainly part of that. Okay, so now we're up by the old chicken coop, which we hope one day to convert into an Airbnb. It'll need some serious fixing up before that happens. But the chicken coop leads to what we call the North Field. And nothing has been sprayed on this farm for the past 25 years. It used to be a sheep farm, and we're hoping that one day it will again be a sheep farm. But we'd like to convert all of this to a silvopasture system, meaning cropping trees with not a set canopy, so lots of light for grass to grow in between the trees, and then moving sheep, turkeys, chickens, maybe pigs, and hopefully also partnering with a cattle farmer to get cows grazing here as well, all rotationally grazing, so moving every day, spreading their manure load out, rebuilding or continuing to build the soil, because the soil here is in really good shape to begin with. But hopefully timing the movement of the animals so that they're underneath the trees right as the things that they like to eat are falling off of them, or right as they're fully in leaf, and that is an art and a science of which we have very little knowledge, but no way to learn like doing stuff. So here's our resident bees. They're not really our bees. They're the steward of these bees is Kurt Hardy at unit number 77 Honey, who also runs Quinte Bee Rescue, and he is setting up honeybee hives on our farm. So far we have 7 in place, and I'm getting buzzed, so maybe I'm a little too close. So Kurt's super into bees, and he was looking for a place to split his colony and expand the number of hives that he has, and he raises bees in a very holistic, thoughtful way, which also creates a bunch of honey. So he's going to start making single farm, basic estate honey at different times of the year and different seasons to be a true expression of
and what the land is producing at the time. So we're excited. Ooh, there is a great blue heron. Comes by every night around this time. So now we've put on our Murray Hills cologne, our Murray Hills dancing shoes. Now we're going to go for a walk. You want to go for a walk? Hey, Hugo, do you want to go for a walk? Dogs that turn their head sideways. Hugo, up. Oh, good boy. So this is one of my favorite spots on the farm. It's a nice shelter belt pathway that the previous owners planted with red pine and white pine that leads out to the other field. I don't even know what we call it. We don't have names for stuff yet. We haven't been here long enough. Hugo, okay. But makes for a real nice shady walk when you're going out to walk in the woods with your dog. Which I don't know if the camera does justice to just how pretty all the daisies are in the field, but the daisies are also telling us that that this field is pretty beat up. So this, again, we don't really have names for them, but this field has been cut for hay by a local farmer for, I guess, the past 20 years, which is, effectively been exporting all the fertility that the grasses and everything have been creating over the years. So this year we're letting it rest, and then we'll get to work rehabilitating it, hopefully next year with rotational grazing of sheep. And then we have longer term plans for permaculture earthworks, so digging swales, which are effectively ditches on contour that will capture water and hold it in the landscape for longer. Planting a lot of trees, especially out here, lumber crops like oak and black locust and black walnut that are also productive, that we can feed the products to pigs and turkeys and other animals that will eat the things that fall off of them, mulberry trees, those sorts of things. So despite there only being 10 acres of woodlot, we really have a lot of diversity here, and there's really 5 mosquitoes, this won't be long. There's really 5 different kinds of types of forest on our farm. And the one I'm standing in now is mostly poplar, ash, and then a little bit of oak, which tells us that the oak trees were probably here long before everything else. This area was logged in the 1850s and again in 1930s, 1950s with more technology that let them really get in and really take everything off of the land. So there's a lot of recovering parts to the farm, and especially in the woodlot that we're really just going to leave to their own devices to recuperate on their own. And it's pretty impressive to watch what nature will do along the way. But the bugs are getting pretty bad early June, so let's keep moving. So every farm should have its wild areas, and this is our wild area. And it's kind of a basin that's got 4 or 5 different springs, some of which, like this one, originated on our neighbor's property and run down through ours, and I'll join up here and then continue to feed down into Cold Creek and then into the Trent River to Lake Ontario. And this area is basically an area we might come in and do like a little bit of selective cutting to free up some of the stronger, straighter stemmed trees that have a better chance of surviving, but for the most part, or better chance of thriving and really forming a new canopy. But for the most part, we're going to leave this alone and sort of see what happens. It's mid-succession right now, meaning that the pioneer trees, the cedars, the junipers, the birch and poplar, again, a different, entirely different type of forest from what we were just in, and we've really only gone a couple hundred meters. There's another spring. Those are starting to sort of get washed out and keel over, or sort of die of old age. So there's a lot of leaners, and a lot of standing deadfall, and a lot of trees that are already down. But we can see the other trees that are growing out of the out of the compost that those bigger trees are creating. So we're really interested to see what kind of trees move in here next. So the spot I'm standing in now, forest has changed again. We're getting a lot more deciduous trees in the canopy. See if I can get that to focus. A lot of hardwood, ash, ironwood, starting to see more maple, fair bit of oak, and I think a lot of that's to do with this great big quadruple stemmed cedar tree that fell over not too long ago from the looks of it, and created a big gap in the canopy that allows different kind of trees to pop up. And we go up the hill to the highest part of the property, and the forest completely changes again. Here it is almost exclusively sugar maple and ironwood. So we're thinking that once Uncle Bill retires from the maple sugaring business, we'll see what we can do to get his set up here and continue the tradition, because there's some pretty big ones, and this part of the forest we're going to actively manage, which preferring our taller, straighter stems and thinning out the leaners and the in-betweeners, so that way we can get a little bit faster growth and more trees to tap and have a nice, as if we didn't have enough to do in spring already, have a nice maple sugar bush operation. And our last type of forest is cedars and birch and poplar, where there's just a sort of a tiny little spot, but it's I guess it's wet enough here. This is over by where we're on a spring-fed well, and this is over by where the spring comes out of the ground. So I'd imagine there's a pretty big lens of water that's feeding into that and makes it a really nice habitat for birch and cedar and all sorts of other little stuff that I don't recognize because, well, we're pretty new to this. And there's the lower pond, which is, we think, spring-fed, man dug by the previous owners. So there's a big berm at the back. I wouldn't really want to swim in it, but we might skate on it in the winter. And we're thinking about ways in which we can sort of semi-wild ducks and provide for their protection from predators, while also letting them live the most duck-like life while we take their eggs and occasionally cure their breasts in salt and eat them as prosciutto. And here's the startings of the nut grove. So that is a big old walnut tree, black walnut tree. That is the mother of all the walnut trees on the property. Some of the neighbors out for a rip, including those little walnut trees and this little walnut tree and that little walnut tree and that one. That's the sickly looking heart nut. That may become firewood. That's another walnut tree that's probably going to go, because here we planted some hazelnut, some layer seedling hazelnuts, one of which looks a little happier than others, none quite so happy as Hugo. And to the south of the nut grove, southeast of the nut grove, is what we call the south field. So it's the lower field. Apparently it looks really, really fertile, but nothing's really been done with it for the span of about the past 20 years or so, since the last time sheep were on the property. So that'll be an interesting journey, bringing that back into production as well. Oh, good boy. We'll make a bird dog of you yet, Hugo.